On the day what the sky blue, many men didn't know it coming.
I thought that I would open this episode with a song. It's actually a Japanese song, it's not Chinese. It's by a band called ToeJ:T, and it's called 8.6. And I thought it was kind of perfect for the story we'll be doing in this episode today. The story is Coming of the Light by Chen Qiufan, and it's on the surface a story about like a tech startup and things that go wrong at it, or they go wrong for a guy who's part of it. But the parts of the story that grab me are about the end of the world and what brings it on. And this song that we're listening to is all about a huge cataclysm that happened on the day when the sky was blue, and presumably clouds, fluffy and white, were in the sky. I thought I'd also open the episode with the word of the day, do something a bit different. The word of the day I've chosen is actually cloud. It's yun, so you might know it from Yunnan province. It's one of my favourite characters just visually. It's quite simple. To me it looks a little bit like a cloud. It looks like it's floating, to my eye anyway. But I think with this nice song in your ear and with the pleasant white fluffy image of a cloud, you could try and think about something scary under the surface. Clouds move very slowly without a sound. You don't see them coming usually. They just have arrived, and you don't notice their arrival, you notice the fact that they have arrived. And we could think about how technology does that. There's a little bit of buzz when it appears, you look away for a month or a year or a decade, you look back, and that technology has reshaped the world you live in. You're living in the world it made. Or you could be living in the apocalypse it made, like in this story. So I've enjoyed waxing lyrical about lovely songs and fluffy clouds and the end of the world. Let's get on with things. Let's get on to the TrChFic news, and after that you'll hear my discussion about Coming of the Light by Chen Qiufan with Francesco Verso, who's his publisher in Italian in translation. Francesco Verso publishes a lot of sci-fi from all over the world, all translated into Italian. So yeah, he's the guest on the show. We're going to be talking about this story. But before we get to that conversation, we're going to do the TrChFic news, the translated Chinese fiction news. So we got 4 items. They're all kind of different. Yeah, I think there's a reasonable spread of media here. The first one I've gone for is something you can read. It's taken from the new issue of Renditions, which is an academic produced journal, I guess by the Chinese University of Hong Kong. They produced this little, I don't know if it's got a print edition actually, but a journal of translations of Chinese lit into English. And the issue has, let me just see, I'm going to see how many things they have available for free online. The intro note and one story are available to read just in PDF form. And the story that is available is called A Ramble Through the Heart by Kāiguāng. And I don't actually know anything about this story. I've just popped the link in the show notes under news. So yeah, I'll say no more, and we'll go on to the next news item. This is news about my Scandinavian nemesis. I say Scandinavian because I don't know if she's Norwegian or Swedish or what, but Astrid Muller Olsen's podcast Sinophone Unrealities has a new episode out, and it's a really interesting and enjoyable listen. It's her talking to Natasha Bruce about her translation of Dorothy Tse's Owlish, although Owlish is a very reduced and clever translation of a much longer Chinese title, which I won't spoil for you. I won't spoil the Chinese title because I can't read all these simplified characters I'm looking at, and I will not actually spoil the one thing I can read, which is the literal translation of that title. But they talk about that and loads of other things, and it's a great chat and it's a great podcast, and you should listen. And if you like shorter form podcasts, this is if like compared to mine, that is, if you think my shows go on for too long, Astrid's on this show, I think they float around the half an hour mark. So I know some people prefer that. So, never mind all the speculative and literary / science fiction-y conversations. Maybe you just like half-hour nuggets of audio no matter what is in them. In that case, that would also be a podcast for you. Okay, next news item. So it's more women, if you can believe it. And I know I made that sound like I dread the prospect. But it's a round table about sci-fi. Again, we're on my favorite theme. It's shared on the science, now what is it called? I always forget. The SFRA review. What does SFRA stand for? Science Fiction Research something? This is embarrassing. I'm going to have to go looking for what the acronym stands for. Science Fiction Research Association. Yeah, they have published a round table which has 4 people very interested in Chinese science fiction, and I think we've got at least one friend of the show on here. We've got Mia Chen Ma, Angela Chan, Yen Wei, Frederica Schneider, Vielsecker, and Regina Kāiguāng. Again, I have not read this one, but it's 4 people. 4? Am I right? 1, 2, 3, 5. Sorry, 5 people, all very interested in Chinese sci-fi, discussing it, and you can read this for free on the SFRA website. So what's not to like? Okay, and the final news item. It's meta news again. It's me parroting some praise for this show that I'm very happy with. So I'll try not to devote half the news segment to this, but everyone's a little bit guilty of narcissism, right? So the news is Kindle Reviews, a horror blog of all things, I don't know if this is like a monthly thing they do. I think it is. They choose a couple podcasts to promote every month. And I got a runner-up. So their Scream of the Week, or maybe it's a weekly thing, they awarded to a show called Invasion of the Remake podcast. So I guess it's a podcast all about remakes of movies. And they happened to have covered some horror films. And I got runner-up for what was it on the basis of? It was because a recommendation was passed on to this person by Yi, or maybe not directly, but Yi Izzy Yu, who I really need to talk to. Yi Izzy Yu, if you are listening, we should do an episode, maybe with John as well, John Yu Branscombe. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so this blog gave a really nice review of my show, and I won't read it aloud as I'm very tempted to, but it's if you want to see someone write nice things about this podcast, links in the show notes. But that is all, I guess. That's my pretentious intro with that nice Japanese song. That's the end of the pretentious news segment. So now we can get on to the totally unpretentious and down-to-earth interview. Right, so on the show we've got Francesco Verso. It is fantastic to have you on the show. I guess listeners will find out why soon. But first, I'll just ask you, Francesco, how's it going and what have you been up to recently?
Oh, well, I'm fine, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And I've been recovering from many book fairs, which are, now starting to get back in as the new kind of normal. And so I had some book fairs where I've showcased a lot of books, and especially Chinese science fiction books. So that's it. I'm preparing for a small break and then the next year.
Excellent. That kind of leads right into my next question. What is it that you do? Why have you been at these book fairs?
Yeah, I'm a science fiction writer and editor of a small press called TrChFic, which is more like a cultural association promoting an alternative way to the future, let's say, including voices that have been neglected or that are considered marginalized by the dominant culture into the science fiction publishing sector. So let's say that we translate from 13 languages and more than 35 countries the best science fiction authors from all over the world.
That's so interesting. So before I hit record, we were talking a little bit. Well, I mentioned that the publishing masters I did, and one topic that was covered in one of the modules we did on that masters was about translated fiction, and a lot of the ways. One of the biggest frames we looked at it through, aside from just the pure business side of things, is how it works as a way of trying and succeeding or trying and failing to address some of the imbalance of world literature. And in translation, the balance goes something like this. People in English-speaking countries don't read a lot of stuff translated into English from other languages. And pretty much everyone else in the world reads a lot of stuff translated into their language from English. And it doesn't, I guess it doesn't take a genius to work out why that is. It's probably a combination of the legacy of British imperialism, and there's another English-speaking country today, which is a big power on the globe. You guys may have heard of it, the USA. And we're here to talk about a piece of Chinese lit that you've actually handled its publication in translation, but it's not into English that you've handled, it's into Italian. So that's two non-English perspectives. Pretty interesting stuff. So I wanted to ask you about those 13 languages that you translate into Italian from, or you publish translations from those languages. Chinese is just one of those. Are the other 12 from countries and languages that are equally sort of marginalized, or do you think China and Chinese lit is a really special case?
Well, let's say that considering Chinese as a marginalized language is really it's bizarre, because it's probably the second most spoken language in the world, and it's going to be the first in a few years. So it is a matter of how the perception and the imbalance of reality is not represented into the market. But the other languages are big, important, relevant languages like French, German, Spanish, Portuguese. Then I would go into, some minor ones like Italian or Turkish or Arab. The fact that science fiction has been dominated by the English language, it doesn't mean that the other countries are without their local science fiction scene. Rather the opposite. I found out that science fiction has been written in many countries. Of course, there is a gap in terms of technology, of access to information, but that has been closed by the spread of the internet, by the accessibility of many worldwide technologies. So there is now an issue of representativeness of science fiction, not of the quality of the stories themselves. Then we can go into subjective, let's say, values of what is good and what is not good, or what should be considered science fiction, what should not be considered science fiction, or what are the standards, but who sets these standards? Who defines the very concept of diversity? Why should I be diverse from you? And what is the acceptable science fiction on a global level? That's so. There's a lot to think about that.
Yeah, you could think about it forever. Actually, it's almost as if you read my mind there, because there's another question I wanted to ask you about the sort of Italian side of things. And this links back to my master's, because for my dissertation, I chose to look at the translation of sci-fi into English. And the angle I sort of went in thinking I was going to talk about it from was, look, the literature that makes it into English from Chinese is very biased towards certain types of novel. I assumed it would be mostly dissident fiction, and then everything else gets sidelined. I found that maybe wasn't quite the case. It was a combo of literary fiction, like highbrow realist or maybe magical realist stuff, and dissident fiction, which is usually in a similar vein, but with a political edge. And then anything that was more in the genre fiction, more fantastical or speculative lane got sidelined. One of the types of book I thought was really interesting were these books which were definitely realist and rebellious, but weren't dissident and weren't traditionally literary, which were sort of about bad boys. But even they were not really fantastical and speculative, like a lot of Chinese sci-fi and fantasy is. Although I've found even that finding in my dissertation, I question more and more, because you can get so many interesting Chinese genre fiction books in English today, from the wuxia and the sci-fi and crime genres. So for all the complaining I wanted to do in that dissertation, I found Chinese English lit, English language Chinese lit and translation is fairly diverse. It's just interesting to see who gives what attention. I try to give every type of thing on the market attention, but I'm going to get to my point now and ask you the question: what is that landscape like in Italian? Like if I go into a big bookshop in Rome or Milan and I start looking for books translated from Chinese, what do you think I would find on the shelf? And then if I went online, would I find other stuff like on the Italian Amazon or?
Well, when let's say that in mainstream literature, you would find the worldwide famous authors like Moyen, Yuhua, and this kind of authors, which are translated in every language. So when it comes to science fiction, you will probably find just Liu Cixin and the novel of Chen Qiufan, The Waste Tide. Nothing else. Really, nothing else. The other things are things that I've done, but are not distributed. So
Right.
we chose another path. So you will not find them on the bookstore, but you will find them online. So online, there is of course much more titles, diverse titles, also getting on the market faster than traditional distribution, let's say.
So would I be right in saying you do a lot of like e-publications, or do you do print books as well?
No, they are printed. They're printed. I do both, of course. I started out as a native digital publishing house, but then I have to say that Amazon opened up a KDP, a Kindle Direct Publishing system, and it worked out very well for me. So they handled the print on demand, and they did a very good job for me. So I could print also these books and distribute them very, very easily. So yes, that's the way we use at the moment.
Yeah, for anyone listening who's not so up on their publishing terminology, print on demand, that would mean that if someone orders one book, Amazon or some other company, I guess Amazon likes to do everything themselves, will print one copy. How would I say this? So it will be a single copy, which is not the traditional way of publishing books, where you do a big economic sort of, what's the word? Economics of scale print run of 500 or 1,000 books.
Print run, first a huge print run, and then stock them somewhere.
Yeah. So print on demand is a little bit like printing a document out of your inkjet printer at home in a way, and then it's
here for a long time, so people should know about that.
Yeah. I was actually talking to another publisher recently based in Chester and Manchester, which is convenient because the little town I live in these days is on the railway route between Chester and Manchester, but he helps to run Camphor Press. Actually, he listens to the show, so hello, Michael. And he was telling me that's how they do their books. It's a way to sort of solve the problem so many indie publishers have of like, how the hell am I going to pay for a print run of 1,000 books if I can't rely on selling them all speedily? Yeah, so it's a nice little innovation, I guess, in book printing. I guess we shouldn't talk the publishing business all evening. We should get to the story, the thing that people are really here for. So you mentioned earlier that two ways one can think about what to publish from other languages. You could think about diversity, trying to pick stuff because it deserves to be included in the bigger picture, or you could think about quality, picking stuff because you love it and it's awesome. And I think I'm guessing we both agree this story is just awesome. It's by a really interesting author. It's Coming of the Light, and it's by Chen Qiufan. And I'm really excited to be talking about this one. So I want to ask you, what was your contact with Chinese Lit? So first contact with Chinese Lit, first contact with Chinese sci-fi, first contact with Chen Qiufan, and then finally, what was your first contact with Coming of the Light? You can manage that.
We got some time. Okay. So let's start. Being a sci-fi writer, I was participating in many science fiction conventions, and I get to know many people. So I started this small enterprise of future fiction. I was scouting for non-English science fiction, and I wrote to Ken Liu, and he told me that there was a student in Beijing studying science fiction with Professor Wu Yan at the Normal University of Beijing, and she was Italian. And so he said,
Oh.
you should talk to her. And this student really was, my contact with Chinese science fiction. So she introduced me to Professor Wu Yan, and I had the crazy idea of putting together an anthology of Chinese science fiction in dual language, in Italian and Chinese. So can you imagine the fact that I put Chinese on the book was kind of I don't know, it was considered as crazy. I mean, really, why would you waste half of the book for Chinese language? And so it was at the beginning it was nonsense, but then through this crazy choice, I was invited to China, and that's where I met Chen Qiufan at the Chinese Science Fiction Convention. But let's say that I have, of course, read his stories before actually meeting him. And that happened probably in one of the, I mean, it's Ken Liu. We have to thank his work, his excellent translations, that he allowed us to read a lot of these stories, and including, of course, Coming of Light. So this is the kind of wrap up, because of course there's a lot in between. I mean, I'm talking about 5 years ago, and over the years I've met Chen Qiufan many times. I invited him in Italy. He stayed at my place. We went together for a tour in Italy. We went together in many conventions in China. So we are friends. We talk regularly. I even ask him to write stories or stuff like that. I even changed the title of Coming of Light in Italian, and he said, "Well, that's better."
So what is it in Italian?
The title in Italian is Buddhagram, because of the app that is the center of this amazing story. And I thought that it would have been more catchy to call actually the app, the title, Buddhagram, because Coming of Light is something that
it could mean anything.
Yeah, it could mean anything. It's a bit too, general. I don't know. I didn't get the concept. I mean, from the title, Coming of Light, I was a bit puzzled. But when I read the story, I said, "Look, I have a suggestion. What do you think?" And he said, "Yeah, go for it."
Yeah, that's a great title, Buddhagram. I guess for listeners who've not read the story, now would be a great time to explain why on earth we've got the name Buddhagram in there. So this is what I've been doing for the last dozen or so episodes. I'll have a go at summarizing what happens in the story. I probably will drop some spoilers, not 100% spoilers, but if you're listening and you really don't want to know, if you don't want the short story spoiled, then close your ears. But yeah, it goes something like this. We're following a young man in a tech company. I believe his name is Zhou Chongbo, and he starts off recounting a time in his childhood when he was with his mom in a supermarket, and they met a monk, and the monk recited to them a koan, which I have the definition of a koan in my notes here. My notes are loading. So a koan would be a succinct paradoxical statement or question used as a meditation discipline for novices in Buddhism, and then expanding on that a bit more. The effort to solve, in quotes, a koan is intended to exhaust the analytic intellect and the egoistic will, readying the mind to entertain an appropriate response on the intuitive level. Each such exercise constitutes both a communication of some aspect of Zen experience and a test of the novice's competence. And maybe the really important word there is Zen, because Buddhism, maybe even specifically Zen Buddhism, is a big theme through the story.
Yep.
But the other theme is the tech, like China's Silicon Valley, basically. Zhongguancun, the area in Beijing, that's like the Chinese Silicon Valley. So the guy we're following, Zhou Chongbo, he's working in a startup in Zhongguancun. And I guess long story short, his boss, I forget who comes up with it, but his boss's company, this startup, creates this app, Buddhagram. Now, this is where I might be getting things a bit muddled. Buddhagram has a little built-in trick, a little hack in its the way it captures images, because I guess it's supposed to be a bit like Instagram. Yeah, it has a watermark which is capable of containing a way of retrieving the entire image. So if you crop or alter or reduce or shrink or blow up a Buddhagram image, the original can be retained from or re-extracted from the watermark. And this causes the app to behave strangely. That's from what I recall. And then the other aspect, the other strange thing that happens with Buddhagram is that they get some monks to bless the app, and that causes it to go viral. And I guess the reader can interpret the reason it goes viral how they like. Either it's a silly meme or there's really something to it. People are looking for some spirituality in their lives. And this is, I guess, where I start to sort of get lost, because the plot gets weird. Weird things start to happen. The world seems to be becoming strange. Maybe, do you want to pick it up here, Francesco? Because I'm losing the thread.
It's not so weird. It's that the app gets into the market and it's being used in different ways. So of course it overwhelms its own creator, and it becomes like a boomerang effect. So people start to ask blessing for every kind of thing, and that creates problem because they want to know who the monk is, and that goes into personal problems for the protagonist's family, and so that's why he has to run away, and everybody has to run away from the company because of these snowball effect. That's where we go into the second part of the story.
Right, perfect. Now, my memory is a bit hazy here as well, but I think the essence is Zhou Chongbo has fled to a Buddhist monastery himself, and he's an anonymous sort of monk. But one of his superiors in the monastery has some very odd ideas about the nature of the universe, and seems to see some parallels between, I guess, digital reality and the reality that Buddhism describes. And I have a note that after I thought about the story for a bit, I felt that although it's not really said explicitly in the story, there's sort of three levels of reality. There's the sort of earthly world, the Buddhist concept of dust, which came up in the last episode of this podcast, Dancing Through Red Dust. So if listeners know a bit about Buddhism, or if they remember, earthly dust, red dust, is this idea that everything in the world is sort of illusory and tries to lure you in. The world's something we need to see past. So there's the real world, but everyone seems to kind of want to escape the real world onto the screen, the black mirror, if you like. There's some discussion in the story of how everyone's addicted to their phone. The main character describes having like a phantom notification pulse on his thigh where his phone is in his pocket. Like I've had that phantom pulse. And I made a comment in my notes that Mark Fisher, the deceased theorist who I've brought up on the show a few times, has a talk where he talks about how his phone seemed to have reprogrammed his nervous impulses as well, because he has an impulse to check his phone. So yeah, there's the screen world that is transforming people's brains and is a place people want to run away to get out of this world. And then there's the hidden reality that is going on in the background. That's referenced directly a few times. And I'm skipping ahead slightly to the end, but at the end of the story, the world seems to be breaking in some way. There's a discussion, I forget who Chongbo has it with, but there's speculation that something in Buddhagram transforms the sort of background reality of the universe, and weird things are happening. Someone in the US, a US university, gets shot off screen, so to speak, and corporate secrets have been stolen, I think,
there's kind
from
of
the US.
A rogue algorithm.
Yeah, a rogue algorithm. And then right near the end of the story, a meteor, well, it seems like, because we only see it in a reflection rear view, a meteor shower that was briefly mentioned early on in the story, seems to be striking the earth and bringing about a sudden sharp light that ends things. So the weirdness of the story, like first time I read this, I did not have all these complicated thoughts about the meaning, but I noticed the weirdness. There's a creeping weirdness that you don't even know is there until it's too late, and then the story's over. And that's why I love the story, really. The stuff about the tech and Buddhism and Beijing sort of yuppies is really interesting. But I like it because it's flipping weird, and it really, I think this story really rewards a close read, trying to treat it as a koan, trying to treat it as something that you need to solve kind of logically, but kind of also, like I was saying earlier, intuitively, using fuzzy logic and your gut. So yeah, that's why I love the story. What about you, Francesco? Do you think there's anything important I missed, or anything you'd like to gush about how you feel?
No, it's all there. Of course, it's full of many. Yes, it's full of many ideas. It's puts together this strange acceleration of technology that there is in China, with this kind of, they're reaching this escape velocity, and so they need something to hold on to, and they don't know. I mean, is it Buddhism? Is it the family? Is it some kind of materialism? I don't know. And they don't know. I mean, this is the thing. The Chinese science fiction is kind of expressing this confusion, this incredible mess that is happening to the country in a very short amount of time, compressed. They have received so much, and this story is a mix of this. I mean, you go from a Buddhist temple to the Silicon Valley just in the blink of an eye. You go from people being alienated by work to his wife trying to make him realize that they will not have a baby if he doesn't change his life. And I think his wife is also a very nice character. She was addicted to gaming, and then she had to kind of become a ludist, and then she's trying to pull him back on earth, from wherever he's going to. And I like her character very much. So yes, you said everything. I like this story so much that I'm going to do a comic.
Oh, fantastic!
It's gonna be probably next year. So we're gonna have a visual edition of Buddhagram / Coming of Light, and so the story deserves to be told in many ways. I mean, I would totally say to Chen Qiufan, please expand this story, because you have everything to write a novel on this. And I can imagine, if you read the story, you listen to the tone, it feels so much like Fight Club in Beijing,
Yeah.
in some ways.
Yeah, that's the thing I like about Chen Qiufan. I mentioned I quite like some of the bad boy writers. So like Wang Shuo, Murong Shuo, and Ai, all bad boys who are sort of edgy, but they sometimes can be a bit one note, writing about these depressed sort of failure guys, or maybe they're sort of misogynistic, or maybe they just drink too much or something, kind of thuggish men. Whereas Chen Qiufan's stories, it feels like there's an edge and a danger, and it's like stuff on the ground. It's not like Liu Cixin style danger where you're in space and an alien might annihilate you from half the galaxy away. It's much more grounded than that. And that's something I quite like, because one issue I have with some of the translated Chinese sci-fi I've read is that a lot of it is quite cutesy. I found maybe not so much the stuff that's available as books, but a lot of the other younger writers don't feel to me like they're a Chuck Palahniuk kind of guy. There are happier stories about more gentle people, which is great, but my cup of tea is for something a bit more dangerous. And I think Chen is able to get that without it being like dumb. I wanted to bounce back on two things you said there, or not bounce back. That implies I'm going to disagree. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to try and keep the point you made running. So one, you mentioned acceleration. That's a perfect word. If sort of technological acceleration is something people are interested in reading about in a story, this is a great story for that. I have acceleration twice in my notes. Once is a comment on a little bit I've quoted from the story. So the part of the story that I've copied and pasted out into my notes goes like this. In the end, we underestimated the creativity of users. It turned out that Budogram pictures, due to the presence of the watermark, could be recovered from even low-resolution copies or crop fragments. That meant they could be shared and forwarded without taking up much bandwidth or time. And I've said this is a fun idea. It's the idea, and maybe it is just an idea, but it's a compelling one, that you can use technology in a sort of decentralized way through the internet and individuals to give people a kind of a hack, something that will let them compress things or accelerate things and sort of cheat, send more information, but with less time, less effort, more ease. And it even can become a way to sort of, in this story, hack reality, because something weird happens to the universe. So from something as small as a clever little trick that lets you shrink an image but not destroy the image, there's this crazy idea that might transform things in completely unsuspected ways you'd never expect. And the other thing I wanted to go with a little further is you mentioned the wife and how she's been through a sort of deprogramming from a gaming addiction in a camp. And the crazy thing is, maybe you know this, I'll bet some of our listeners don't know, these are real things in China that really exist. I think they might have been short-lived. I think they were became notorious quickly for being extremely harsh. And, education and parenting can be pretty harsh in China, but even this was too harsh for some people, like anti-gaming boot camps. And it's one of many things I think you can see Chen Qiufan doing. He's really good at picking things that you would never believe would be real, but in today's mainland China, actually, they're real.
Yeah.
So there's no footnote in the story to tell readers that, but it's interesting to know. Yeah, I don't know so much about them, but I think it's just worth mentioning.
I wanted to add something because of the first observation you made, because yes, in a way, it looks like the system is giving people some freedom to maneuver this technology, but in reality, what he says some pages later, I translate because I don't have the English text, I have the Italian translation, so I will translate. We are like birds lost in the fog, constantly attracted by bright displays until we forget the direction where we were flying to. So this is the thing. I mean, yes, you can exchange whatever you want, but you're still in this cage and you don't know where you actually what the hell you're doing. You're exchanging pictures and you see, this is the thing. You're making faces, making selfies, changing the blur, the color, the thing. What are you doing with this technology? The nonsense of it is the main point, I think.
Yeah, no, every day I pick up my phone to turn on my alarm for the next morning when I need to get up for work. And then in seconds, I'm in one of my social media apps and I've forgotten I literally remember a minute later I was supposed to set my alarms. I actually did that 3 times in a row last night. It's a bit distressing. I've got that exact quote that you lifted in my notes, and I know we should be going through our questions I prepared, but I really want to quote this part too. So we had the bit about the birds lost in fog, and then it keeps going. This is Ken. I think this is Ken Leo's translation, I should say. So these are Ken Leo's translation. Yet cold night has fallen, and hungry predators are approaching in the dark. My phone beeps, indicating that it's nearly out of battery. My instinctive reaction is not to conserve, but to rush to look through WeChat moments posted in my network. Every last drop of juice must be used to its fullest extent and not be wasted with invisible background processes. Now you get a glimpse of my values, my philosophy. So there's a huge amount to say there. I think the line, hungry predators are approaching in the dark, that's more significant than I think we first realized, because something is coming in the background and we never learn what it is. And the fact it's phrased here as hungry predators is really interesting. Makes it sound like a Cthulhu story. something's coming from outside and we're distracted in the fog. And then I've highlighted the words instinctive reaction because, yeah, it's not even something he has a choice to do. His phone is programming him, reprogramming his instincts, or hijacking his instincts to keep clicking like or whatever. Then we've got the phrase invisible background processes. I highlighted that because I think that's really important. And I think also the phrase every last drop of juice must be used to its fullest extent. Yeah, it's funny. We may maybe think just because we're using technology that we're optimizing or maximizing something, but maybe you're just the one being optimized. Just because you're using a piece of advanced technology doesn't mean anything, because as it is in this story, it's not useful things that are being spent on it. And he actually deliberately rejects the background, which is a mistake he doesn't realize until it's far too late. The background is actually really important. That was all I wanted to say. Do you want to throw out anything else, or should we keep moving through our set questions?
Let's move on.
Okay, great. Let's move on. So I thought we could look at the koan itself, keeping things mysterious. So I'll read the English translation of this koan at the start. Although I guess I can say, if you're a Chinese listener and you're like, koan, what the hell are you talking about? In Mandarin, this is a gong'an. It has a K in English, I think, because of the old Wade Giles spelling, where letter G's were letter K's. So in like the 20th century, this would have been known as a kong'an in I guess in English, but it should be in Mandarin a gong'an. But in this story, Ken Leo has rendered it as just koan, which is how you'd usually see it in English. So anyway, here's the koan. As clouds drift across the sky, so master in the void is seen. Dust clings to everything but what is true. Over and over the monk queries, what does your visit mean? Master points to Cyprus, which in courtyard has taken root. So I have some thoughts about what it means, but Francesco, what the hell does it mean?
Well, I would rather listen to you first because I'm not so good in koan.
Okay, yeah. So I spent a whole evening puzzling this.
Good.
Right. So my interpretation, and I'm reading this from text, that's why I'm using big words. I think the koan suggests that truth exists on timescales beyond our understanding, in things that exist outside of human time, outside of material we can perceive in the background and in absence rather than in the foreground. And I'm getting that from the second line. Dust clings to everything which is true. Dust, Hongchen, red dust, that's the illusion. That's the world. That's like the Matrix, basically. That's the world Buddhists want to sort of transcend. The tree which has already taken root in the courtyard suggests some non-human working. So I'm deliberately using weird arcane phrases, but something that is not human. A tree is a kind of life that exists far beyond our lifespans often, and has some, it has some kind of existence, plant existence, which we just can't get our heads around. Plants are aliens. That's what I'm saying. And it's an invasion from the outside, maybe. I know a lot of courtyards in Chinese houses often people have planted the tree there, but the koan says it has taken root. So maybe a bird dropped it from its, its feces, and it's growing there. It's not from this human home. It's some alien thing growing there, and that process is underway very, very slowly. And the last line I've said, the master may have stepped out from the beyond to deliver a warning, because the first line says, as clouds drift across the sky, so master in the void is seen. So something has arrived. So it's just all very spooky.
I think that the two first lines are about the flow of life, the fact that things are moving, are inconsistent, are have this we are in this stream of life, and the only way we can grasp, we can understand something is putting roots. So in a way, with all this acceleration of technology, the only way is to plant your roots, to have a baby, so this is kind of I see it as he's projected into this accelerated reality, which is stopping him from seeing the reality of things. And then he goes back to his, I mean, or at least he plants his roots, watching, his baby born. So it could be, I mean, of course we are just thinking about, but these forces, the one thing that is dynamic, the other that is static, and these is the two main forces of the universe, the entropy and the other one,
the more static sort of, the eternal, there's a good word.
Yes, the two forces,
Yeah.
That's what I got from it.
Right. Yeah, you've reminded me of something that is initially going to sound irrelevant, but we'll see why it's irrelevant. I was in my hometown, Dundee, waiting on my girlfriend's dad arriving. And while we were sat outside, there was a youngish mother with a toddler, and the toddler was just wandering around. Fortunately, it was not too busy. It was a sort of large courtyard sort of area, funnily enough. And the boy was just wandering wherever, and she was barely paying him any attention. I kept worrying he was going to run onto the road or fall over. And the reason she wasn't paying him any attention was she was eyes on her phone. And that sounds like the most mundane thing. I might sound like an old man complaining about that. But like in the context of this story, that mum is trying to escape reality into her phone. And the cost is neglecting her child. And I think if I remember right, when Chongbo sees the meteors or whatever it is coming to destroy the world, he sees it reflected in the eyes of his son that he's looking into. I think I'm remembering that right. So yeah, he's finally paying some really close attention to a really important part of reality, and he's losing it. There's one other thing I wanted to say. So we mentioned acceleration, and I know in accelerationist or Silicon Valley thinking, one sort of silly but also, who knows, maybe really important strand of thought is that all this technological acceleration actually has one endpoint, and that's the creation of artificial intelligence. You use the word liftoff. And that line of thinking says when technology is able to improve itself, that's takeoff. That's where something not of the flesh is going to sort of surpass us and replace us. Who knows? Could be a ridiculous thought, but I kind of wonder if that's not necessarily what the story's about, but it's hinting at that sort of that arrival of something that's totally beyond us from technology, but also from something beyond our mind's comprehension.
I think that story was a bit too early for that. He's working on that at the moment. I mean, this story is from some years ago, but at the moment he's really into artificial intelligence. So that's what he's working on now.
Right. Interesting. I think we've talked quite a lot about the foreground and the background already. So I'll move on to memes, another accelerating crazy thing. And I know memes are something that technology has accelerated because I was around the end of high school. The meme, like the square or rectangular JPEG with a caption, was becoming a thing. And fast forward 5-10 years, 11 years to today, memes are like so bizarre and referencing references. They haven't just become more complex, they've disintegrated. Like the memes have become, part of the joke is that they might be more pixelated or more distorted. JPEG files do a thing where if you share them over and over again, they degrade. And that was a thing. I think that was a trend from a few years ago. But yeah, the acceleration of these things that by definition are things that are transmitted and reshaped and repeat, they have a tendency towards entropy, not sort of refinement. And memes from Chinese and Western culture appear in the story. So off the top of my head, Chongbo's his wife, references NPCs, which is quite a political meme actually, from sort of the 4chan alt-right world. I think initially they use it to describe it's from video games, non-player character. So it's people who basically have a mainstream opinion that these guys don't like. They dehumanize those people by calling them NPCs. And that's referenced in the story in not such a malicious way, but that's the origin point. Like we could use it today and sort of recontextualize it, but that's where it spawned, that meme. And then we have at least one other from Chinese culture. We have duang, Have you ever come across Duang before?
What do you mean? Because I'm not familiar with the word.
Duang. So it's a Duang. I'll find it in the original text. Duang. Yeah, okay. So Ken Liu's translation, it goes like this. On the hour or at designated times, the box will even emit a tranquil, meditative duang, like the
Oh,
ringing
okay.
of a now it's a meme because there's no duang in Mandarin. You can have
Yeah.
guang or huang, but it can't begin with the D sound.
Okay.
That's an internet joke that started. So someone rediscovered an old advert Jackie
Mm-hmm.
Chan, Chen Long, as he's known in mainland China, did for some shampoo. And he was
Okay.
trying to describe what the shampoo does to your hair. And he went, oh, it does sort of something, but it makes it curly and bouncy. It's kind of like, and then he goes, duang. And
Mm-hmm.
the people who were sharing the video were saying, wait, which character is that? What is duang? And someone actually made a new Chinese character to represent duang. They took the Chung and Long from Jackie Chan's name, merged them together, and that became a new Chinese word, duang.
All right.
And I have an anecdote for that one. A year or two after Duang had been a big hit on the Chinese internet, I had an internship at that Shanghai magazine, and they were doing a sort of New Year meme review. They were trying to do an article for expats to teach them about big memes on the Chinese internet. And one of the editors suggested, how about we do Duang? And the lead editor said, no, Duang is dead. That was years ago. There's no
Oh,
more Duang. So Duang is dead is like burned into my mind. But I guess when he wrote the story, it might have been big. But yeah, anyway, so there are Western and there are Chinese memes in the story. What do you think of that?
this would be a perfect question for Chufan.
Right.
The thing is probably is trying to use it in a playful way, not so. Even the non-playing characters is used in a very soft way, like to say you pretend too much of yourself. You think you are, you're not so important as you think you are. So, in this way, I don't think, I don't have anything more to add to this.
That's all
Really,
right.
I don't know.
I'll do a variation on that question then, that's maybe better suited to you,
Hmm.
since you edit and write a lot of fiction. Well, you write your own fiction and you edit published fiction from all over the world. Have you seen other stories that do interesting things with internet culture in the sci-fi that you handle that would be similar or an interesting contrast with what Chaufan's doing in this story?
There's a problem here with the what we miss with the translation, so it's it's difficult.
I think it's also difficult because a lot of writers don't touch sort of like social media in their stories. They sort of just to keep things simple, they don't include it. Like smartphones in movies are often sort of snipped out because it would totally transform the plot.
It's difficult because it's culturally specific, in a way. I mean, if you're not doing your own thing in English for the English speak, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would like to see it in Chinese, if I could understand Chinese, how it was handled. But I do have published an Italian story that deals exactly with memes,
Mm.
and it's full of crazy things. These cats all over the place, and so there is this. I don't know. It depends on how much the writer belongs to this generation. So it must be young enough to, because I'm too old for that probably.
Right.
So I have a very passive and outside point of view about memes. So I'm totally missing the references, and totally missing the also the sense of it. I mean, I have just a broad general idea, and I don't use them, and I don't, I'm not part of that culture, so I'm not the best person to talk about that.
That's fair. I have a half sister who is half my age actually, so I'm 28.
Yeah.
So do the maths, you can work out how old she is. And yeah, she's living in a different internet culture from
Yeah.
me. I know
Yeah.
I'm never going to touch TikTok. No, no, thank you. But it's interesting how the nature of the media, the medium shapes how you use it. So
Yeah.
like, I don't know, when you were in your 20s, like what were the media and the mediums that were on the cutting edge that you were interested in?
I was born analogic.
Mm.
Of course, I was a DJ, and I used vinyl, and then all of a sudden it was CDs, and then all of a sudden it was MP3, and then all of a sudden bam, bam, bang, streaming, and disappeared. So I've seen these in music, but well, of course, I was grown up with a Commodore 64 with tape tape recording forever to load the game, and Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and these kind of things. So of course, it's another age. It's completely another age. These things are really specific to your generation, because if I say to my daughter Pac-Man, she would just probably think it's a T-shirt, because they see these. I mean, I've even talked to some people. They think that, what is Nirvana? Yeah, well, they think that, Nirvana is a group. They don't know about what before that, what was the meaning of Nirvana. They even think Nirvana is a T-shirt again, because they seen that media. They don't have any reference to the rest.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, we that terminology speaks to the people that can understand it, and that's interesting.
Yeah, I think the Nirvana logo on T-shirts is a good example of like
Yeah.
an analog meme. I'm gonna use this as a chance to bring up the original meaning. It was Richard Dawkins of all people that came up with this word. I guess before he was focused mostly on being an angry
Yes.
atheist, he was
Yes.
interested in more interesting stuff. So his definition
The selfish
is
gene.
yeah. An element of a culture or system of behavior passed from one individual to another by imitation or other non-genetic means. So yeah, I was talking about memes there as if they began in 2000 and like 8, 9, 10. But of course that's
Mm-hmm.
not true. Cultural memes are,
Yeah.
they've gone on since the ancient times.
Cool.
They're digital is one form that they take now, but it's, there are still analog memes.
Yeah.
I'll keep us moving, but yeah, I just wanted to say, when I was growing up, I had a cassette player that had like kids' stories, like children's audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like the last years of those things. I was born right at the transition to CDs.
Yeah.
And yeah, now they're gone too, basically. I still have my
Yeah.
CDs, but I've got no reason to keep them really.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, let's keep it moving. So my next question was about Silicon Valley and Zhongguancun, so like the Beijing Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is actually quite similar to that last question I asked you. So you're someone who's very involved in sci-fi. I wanted to ask you, have you seen other stories that handle the tech world and its obsessions? And that those could be any obsessions, but yeah, have you seen much stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, especially, if we're talking about Chinese science fiction, I've published a lot of it, and of course there's a lot of these anxieties and a lot of these fears that are projected, embedded into these new technologies. So, for example, I published a beautiful story by Mu Ming, which is a young, talented author, and she wrote a story about retinal adjusters, which is really like affecting the way we see things, we see colors, and this is a beautiful story that, of course, goes so deep into the sense of sight, that it really changes the way we perceive reality. And there's a conflict with her mother, which of course is, she opposes this kind of technology, but she's left behind because everybody is using this technology to augment themselves. So what is the cost that we pay in terms of refusing to upgrade ourselves, and what do we get from the standardization of our sight with all the others, because these retinal adjuster are kind of letting everybody see the same reality. So it's really, really interesting, and that's another way of seeing seen from the perspective of a female writer. That's also very, very interesting. That's a wonderful story. That says a lot. And also, I mean, if you take, probably you've read Xia Jia's story, Tong Tong Summer. That's also, I mean, the use of the Hafu, the use of the android to support an aging population is wonderful there, because it puts the missing energy of the old people back into circulation through the use of technology. So you have a positive use of these androids in a way that they are supporting the old people. So really, I think it's a very interesting way how Chinese writers are trying to answer or trying to address some of the big questions that are pervading the population, or even the horizon of what things, how they will be gone this way or the other way. That's a very good forecasting experiment, I think, or forecasting exercise.
Yeah. As much as I like Chen Qiufan, sometimes his stories can get really literary. Let's say they don't work. They don't always work so much as like practical sort of thought experiments of where could the technology take us. But Tong Tong Summer is an interesting case of something that could be one way that things really could go. It's so it's got that interesting an interesting connection with a possible not so abstract reality, and
I just remember another one that I just published last month. It's Han Song. Probably
I love him so much. Yes,
Han Song, and there's this story, Paradise 28. I translated like that, where they kind of create these cities for old people, where they send these old people to these cities run by artificial intelligence. Are they better off? I don't know. I mean, they are perfectly happy. They do what they want. They have good life, enjoy everything. But they see their children. They don't see their children anymore. Just holograms. So it's so weird. But I heard that they're going to have some experiment of having these special areas where old people are, put all together.
Yeah, well, I saw, I think it was just a thumbnail for a news story I didn't read, but it was saying this year could be the first year that the world population has fallen. And I guess this is something that's coming for a lot of countries, both Western and East Asian, is the problem of the aging population, where the number of old people is going to be that high. How on earth, economically, as well as socially, can you support them? So I think Chen Qiufan might have said this himself. I know I've said it. I think I said this in my dissertation. The same future is coming for all of us, but it could come in China first.
Oh yeah,
and that's one case where the government has taken steps to deal with that population bomb by reversing the one-child policy into a three-child policy. I want to rewind slightly. Because you mentioned Muming. Muming has something. I actually have read that story that you were describing. The London Chinese sci-fi group covered it, and I love it. I would love to talk about that story, but I'm going to keep us moving. So Muming, at least at the time I read that story, was working in Google in the US. That means she has something in common with Chen Qiufan, because he worked in Google in Beijing when they had more of a presence there. And the reason I'm bringing up Google is I read a little article in preparation for our conversation about Buddhism in Silicon Valley. I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes.
Oh, thank you.
This was written, it was in Wired magazine, which I think has covered Chen Qiufan, actually. I'm sure Wired has done a piece on his work. But anyway, this article is from 2013. So that's 8 years ago now. 2013 was 8 years ago. But it's just it's mental how much Buddhism had sort of integrated into like Facebook, Google, and it makes a great companion piece to this story, because you realize, this is not something Chen Qiufan is just pulling out the air. This is a real thing. And it's an interesting comparison, because obviously in the Silicon Valley context, this is for the most part, Westerners sort of making use of an Eastern, sort of Indian and Asian and East Asian philosophy. I didn't mention this already, but it's in my notes. Zen Buddhism is an interesting thing because Buddhism is Indian. Zen Buddhism has its roots in China as a Chan Buddhism, but we call it Zen because it was sort of preserved and popularized in Japan, where I guess Chan translates to Zen, or is it something like that? And Ken Liu has chosen to render it as Zen, but I would assume in the Chinese it's probably Chan. But anyway, I'm meandering. So to actually know, to stay on that point, there's the guy that the article introduces us to first. It's called Chada or Jade, not sure, Meng Tan, who is, at least at the time the article was written, was Google's Buddhist guy, basically. He would lead little Buddhist meditation sessions. And his official job title in Google was Jolly Good Fellow. He had a very bizarre job title. And it says in the article that Jade Meng Tan was introduced to Buddhism. He's Singaporean. I think he's, judging by Meng Tan, pretty sure he's Chinese Singaporean. And he was introduced to Buddhism by an American Buddhist nun. So there's this really complicated East-West transmission of this Asian religion, which businesses were trying to basically use to sort of hack their workers, like improve their workers, I guess, productivity or their stability, keep them in the company longer, blah, 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 blah. I could talk about this article for a long time, but I'll finish on this. The course in Google where you could practice Zen Buddhism had a name. It was called Search Inside Yourself. So yeah, it's stranger than fiction. I would love to read more stories about this whole dynamic, but it's great that Chen Qiufan has given us an example of how this works or might work in China. I know he used, or at least Ken's translation uses the phrase pop Buddhism. And it's an interesting thing because in the West, I guess we have one kind of sort of dumbed down Buddhism, but the same thing does happen in China. People will sort of post Buddhist stuff to their social media feed that is maybe not, I don't know, it's maybe not direct from the texts. It's not the product of years of meditation, but it's sort of being used as, like, I don't know, posting a feel-good picture of the raccoon hanging from the branch that says hang on in there, you know, just sort of cultural trash floating around on the internet. Do you want to say anything or should we keep moving?
No, let's move.
Keep moving. Okay, right. So at the end of the story, the narrator knows the end's coming, but he doesn't really know why. Do you think as readers, we can piece together like why, like what happened? Is there an answer to the mystery, or do you think it's best left as a mystery?
I was a bit puzzled here because I think that this story, there's no big mystery except for these, you know, these stars maybe falling, but meteorites, I don't know, but I don't think they're hitting the Earth. At least it wasn't meant to be like that.
Maybe I've misread that. Interesting.
No, but I mean, I just no. I mean, I thought the story was pretty clear at the end in the sense that the baby is the solution, from my point of view. From my point of view, the fact that he's going back is he refuses the second call of his former boss, so he's choosing his wife, he's choosing his you know is becoming a man in a way, you know. So he's putting roots. He's becoming that cypress of the koan that we've seen at the beginning, not being blinded by the dust. So that's how I saw the end of the story.
That's great. It's great that we have different readings because then listeners, we're not dictating to one answer to the listeners. I think I might read the last few paragraphs of the story and then listeners will hopefully be enticed to read the rest of it if they haven't already. So it goes like this. If this is the reason that the universe is collapsing, then all I can say is that the programmer is incompetent. Why regret destroying such a shitty world? But I'm holding my baby son, his tiny fist enclosed in my hand. And all I want is for time to stop forever, right now. I regret everything I've done, or maybe everything I haven't done. In these last few minutes, a scene from long ago appears in my mind. That guy wearing the army coat on the pedestrian overpass. He's staring at me and my wife, and like some stuck answering machine, he says, "The quadranted meteor shower will come on January the
Mhm.
4th. Don't miss it. No one is going to miss this grand ceremony for going offline." I play with my son, trying to make him laugh or make any sort of expression. Suddenly, I see a reflection in his eyes, rapidly growing in size. It's the light coming from behind me. So, yeah, you're right. It's quite ambiguous. It could be
Yeah,
happy,
yeah.
or it
I
could
see
be,
your yeah, I see your
yeah,
point. I see your point, and I'm following again. I see your point that maybe this is the end of the world. It could be, but it is totally. It's coming like unexpected. I mean, where is the NASA telling us that the meteorites, are hitting us?
yeah,
Where is the American astronaut saving the world?
yeah. I mean,
That's
call a new reading now. Maybe he's remembering this guy predicting the end of the world, and then he imagines it's coming because what a good note to end on. Finally, paying attention to your son.
I think I don't know. I will ask Chufan next time I see him, or we could invite him to
He'll smile and he'll wink and he'll tell you nothing.
a day. Of course not. No,
Yeah.
that's the way it should be. That's the way it
Uh-huh.
should be.
Totally. Yeah, I feel the same. I'd love to present to him my ridiculous, insane person 10-page theory, but really I shouldn't. It's better not to. Okay, so I guess we're getting near the end of our chat. I have a thing that I've been doing on recent shows where I ask like a bonus question, which I'm going to cut out of the main episode and put it on my Patreon feed for the supporters of the show. So that bonus question is this: yeah, I guess like an easy way to like do a little test, a scientific test. Is this story hard sci-fi or not? Do you need to know some science to
Hmm.
understand it, or is it going to explain you some science? And it doesn't really. I think some knowledge of tech could help, and that would make sense because that's Chen Qiufan's background. He's not like a physics
Hmm.
guy or a chemistry guy or a biology guy or a space
Yeah.
travel guy. When he's worked as a professional outside of literature, it's been in companies just
Hmm.
like this. I'm sure that has helped him to write the story. It makes you wonder if he's met guys like the boss in this story, Lao Shu. I'm sure he couldn't name them, but I'll bet he's met some characters in whether it's in Zhongguancun in Beijing or it's Silicon Valley in California. I bet he's met some
Oh yes,
interesting people.
absolutely.
Have you heard about the in I think in Beijing these days or in China he's been reaching out to shamans from
Yeah.
like Inner Mongolia and
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know much
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
that?
When we talked last time in some panel, he told me that with the pandemic, he used this time to kind of go out of the system. Really, he wanted to disconnect himself from that kind of hyper-connected, accelerated reality. So he really went into the mountains. He spent some time on his own. That's what he told me, and I
Mm.
wonder what is the result of that period of time. Whether that will be reflected into his new stories. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I know.
I'm really interested to see the results because like when I first saw that, it was like shamans, huh? But on the other part of me was like, yeah, that makes so much sense. That seems like a next logical step for the crazy places he's taking his
Let's say
ideas.
I don't know if I mean I don't know if this is true. This is just my personal opinion. I mean, I've been telling him, and not just him, but everybody about this solar punk thing that I'm doing, and I'm been
Mm.
promoting this every way I can, and he liked that very much. So probably I hope that I think he saw the potential of this new idea, and probably is doing something about that. So let's see, maybe. I hope.
Do you do you want to talk more about solar punk for listeners who don't know the word?
Let's say it's just the legacy of the old cyberpunk, which turned out to be our mainstream reality at the moment. So with data theft, with pollution, sprawling cities, this monolithic capitalism that is running the system of the world. Maybe we should find an alternative to this kind of nihilistic, cynical reality that we're being sold every day. So some kind of people are trying to say we should, try to imagine a different scenario, imagine a different reality. So using technologies to give independence and autonomy to the people. To if you can't fix it, you don't own it. These kind of things. Like we used to open up our PCs, we used to open up our devices and change them. But now we can't do that anymore. So we're just consumers. We want to be prosumers. We want to be we want to do the things. Not just use them. And so Solarpunk is trying to say that the new resources, the way we've been producing and distributing wealth is not the best. And they try to create some exit strategies to this current situation in a practical and viable way. So it gives science fiction a new direction, because at the moment is not looking at the future really. From my point of view, it's split in two. One is the let's say the outside, the new space opera, like leave this planet and colonize another one. The other one is
the Elon Musk mentality.
Yeah. That you find another trash bin to throw all the dirt. Yeah. The other one is it's the post cyberpunk. So it's this applying the same logic of extractivism, extracting value from every single behavior, every single thing that capitalism can think about, and then you build up another dystopia, another post-apocalyptic scenario, another, this kind of nonsense, or at least the end of the world. It's over and over again. So in between these two, there is Solarpunk, I think. Some way to try to imagine a better society, because if this goes on, which is one of the most important let's say narrative methods of building a science fiction story, then you end up with the same story over and over again. So we need to find another narrative, and Solarpunk is providing that.
And do you see any of that in the Chinese sci-fi you've come across?
Not at the moment, because they are very confused with, the old generation, namely Liu Cixin, Wang Jingkang, Han Song. They were born with the space opera and with the new wave. So they're still there, of course, from different sides. Han Song is kind of like Philip Dick way, and Liu Cixin is kind of Arthur Clarke way, but the others are more into like, how can I say, they don't have the punk, because they cannot be very easily punk in China. So the
yeah
the fact that they're missing this counterculture, how can I say, outcast vision of reality. So their characters are not
many edgy. Like I was saying earlier, it's impressive actually that Chen Qiufan has found a way to write and be published and have a little bit of an edge, because although you never see it's I guess it's pretty rare even now under Xi Jinping to hear that a Chinese book got censored just for being edgy. But a writer who is like that might struggle to get published unless it's a very safe kind of edginess about a guy who like drinks too much. Or like a thing I've enjoyed in mainland Chinese lit is there's a lot of stories with very nihilistic characters, which I know you were saying is a problem, but it's interesting for me to read that kind of edginess coming from a country which you might expect to censor it. But yeah, to try and have something a bit more substantive, like what you're looking for, but also have a bit of an exciting edge. Maybe they're not getting censored, but maybe they're just not finding publication, so to speak.
Yeah, well, of course, no, there is a lot of this, but solar punk has a specific vibe. So it is a recipe of a couple of ingredients, you know. So there are counterculture. I mean, Jan Ran, have you read the Ether?
Maybe I think Jung Ran is someone I get mixed up with a few other people, but I did Ken Leo's Broken Stars have a Jung Ran story, or have I imagined that?
But find out at Ether. It's a very, very, very good one. But in general, of course, there are positive stories, you know, optimistic stories. But to really consider it solar punk, it takes a bit more. So, but I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm spreading the seeds so they will blossom in due time. I'm sure that's the right place to plant them.
Cool. All right. I guess we can go on to the last questions now, the further reading questions. So if our listeners really read or have read Coming of the Light, aka Buddhagram, and they really enjoyed it, where else would you send them? And this could be something Chinese, but it doesn't have to be.
My suggestion would be to read for sure Han Song, which is a previous generation, but he's a great writer, and he kind of addresses some of the same anxieties of Chen Qiufan, less on a technological level, but more on a philosophical and political level. So his metaphors, his allegories are really powerful one. If you've read The Rebirth Bricks, that's an amazing story, really amazing story. That's one author totally to check out. And I would say if on a more a softer level, I really like Xia Jia. She is let's say the other side. You know, if you have yin and yang, she is, you know, the other side, because they're kind of grow together. They're often the two champions of contemporary Chinese science fiction. They often are invited to conventions together. They are, you know, good looking, stylish, speak English, can, you know, really deliver on stage and online. So she can really mix the myth, legends, and folklore 2,000 years of history and projecting it into the future with these androids and holograms that could, you know, keep the family together, help to sustain this aging population. I really love the way she can talk about the feelings that are affected by technology on different level, on the familiar level, on the couple, on the individual. So that would be my suggestion. The Spring Festival. Have you read that story, Spring Festival?
Yes. Yeah, that's in one of the Ken Liu anthologies, I believe.
That's amazing also. And I have been telling her so many times. I mean, she needs to finish this novel. The encyclopedia of, I don't remember, something about the
Chinese something.
And that, come on, because she hasn't written a novel yet, and I really would like to read it and publish it in Italian. So she's again my one of my best Chinese science fiction author.
Yeah, I think Han Song and Chen Qiufan, they're like my faves, but Xia Jia would be in close running for third place, I think. And the Han Song and her are a great yin and yang, because Han Song's the guy you read, at least I read his stories, and I think, Oh no, I was right all along. Life is
Yeah,
pointless. It is all just it's a horror show. Every second is just a weird,
yeah,
disturbing horror show. I guess I'll just resign myself to my fate. And then when I read Shaja, I stop thinking about all
yeah,
those things. And I'm not thinking, oh, life is wonderful. I'm not thinking in those abstract terms. I'm usually just crying and smiling at the same time. Because yeah, she a lot of her stories have touched me a lot. And when they're not doing that, they're often quite clever or playful or charming. And they're I think they can fool you. You might think they're very simple, but actually you can
yeah,
tell that a lot of thought has gone into them. They're less flashy, I think, than Han Song's
yeah.
stories. Han Song, you feel like this is a very clever and moody guy. Whereas with Shaja's stories, you might just read it as a piece of fun, but if you stop and think about it, it's equally deep. It's just a very
Yeah.
different kind of deep. Okay, very final question. What are you reading just now?
Oh well, I've started to read a book called The Ecology of the Poor, which is in the idea of decolonizing our imagination and decolonizing our system. And the other thing, of course, is I have on my shelf AI 2041 by Chen Qiufan and Kai-Fu Lee. So I'm going to read that
Nice.
book pretty soon. And yeah.
Awesome. I think someone's going to give that one to me for Christmas. So fingers crossed. I guess I'll say what I'm reading as well. Maybe appropriately, I'm reading for the very first time
Oh,
Neuromancer by
oh,
William
wow.
Gibson. So the guy that I think Chen Qiufan has been called the Chinese William
Yes.
Gibson. I'm finding out that's kind of true, but also they're kind of really different as well. Yeah, I guess that's all my questions. Is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye?
No, fine. I'm fine. It was very nice. Very nice. Very good to be here.
Awesome. And now we've reached the final segment. So thank you very much, Francesco, for that interesting chat. I think it's ideal, really, when you've got two somewhat different takes on a story. Always a good sign, really, that if you've encountered some weird event, just like one does in the story Coming of the Light, if everyone who's walking away from that weird event thinks that they saw the same thing, then isn't that a sign that something's gone wrong? In a way, anyway. Maybe I'm being too literary here, not literal enough. Anyway, let's do the plugs, and then you can get on with your life or listen to the next episode of a completely different podcast. So I'll keep it simple, really. If you want to talk to me or other listeners of the show, there's lots of places you can do that. The best place to talk to other listeners would be the Discord. There's a link to join the TrChFic Discord in the show notes. If traditional social media, ancient institutions like Instagram and Twitter are more your thing, then here's where you can find me in the show. The show has its own Instagram at TrChFic, TrChFic, and I am my own person on Twitter. It's terrible. I don't advise it. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Angus Likes Words. Last thing of all, of course, is the Patreon. We've got, I think, we're coming up to having more bonus episodes on the Patreon than standard episodes, though I'm not trying to trick you here. The bonus episodes is usually solo. It's just me, and they average about half an hour long. I've got a teeny little one coming out, queued up for February, admittedly quite far off, which is the little 2.5 minute segment with Francesco, where he revealed to me his favorite Chen Qiufan stories in what order. That's a bonus episode. So all of those little bonus segments are going up on the Patreon too. But yeah, I said I wouldn't take too long. Let's not take too long. Let's say farewell. Of course, very last thing, you probably know what I'm going to say. It's the best way to spread the word about the show. Tell your friends, tell your teacher, tell your pet monkey, if you've got a pet monkey, and spread cropped, enhanced, deformed, semi-deleted images of the show with the Buddhagram watermark attached, and then the recipient will extrapolate the entire RSS feed onto their phone. The wonders of technology, honestly. On that inspiring note, 再见.